Wet water is so vitally important to the whole community. We're to the point now where water is water.
We think it's a responsible thing to do to manage our water, all of our water.
If climate change becomes much worse, how will that affect our surface water supplies? How will that affect how we utilize our groundwater supplies?
Many people look at it as kind of a fundamental God-given right. Everybody should have drinking water.
When you look at water in Native American ceremony, it is the #1 symbol.
The major components of water sustainability in the Espanola Basin include water resources in the basin, legal management of those resources, development and use of water infrastructure, and implementation of various water management activities. As a physical resource, wet water occurs as surface water on the land surface and groundwater in aquifers located beneath the land in the Espanola Basin.
First of all, in the high mountains, that's where snowpack accumulates, and the snowpack is just a natural kind of a reservoir system, if you will. As it warms up, the water is released, and you get a strong pulse of water in the spring. That's the main source of water. Then as the water runs into the valleys, it soaks into the ground, into the aquifers, and it's released slowly over time and into the stream systems. A main part of the watershed is up in Colorado, in the San Luis Valley. It's the San Juan and Sangre de Cristo Mountains up in there. The watershed is really bounded in New Mexico by the Jemez and the Sangre de Cristo mountain ranges. The major surface water courses in the Espanola Basin are the Rio Grande and the Rio Chama. On the Chama River system, there's a number of reservoirs. The highest up in the system is the Heron Reservoir, and that actually collects water that's brought through a trans-basin diversion from the San Juan River. Below that is the El Vado Dam, and that captures water for irrigation purposes in the middle Rio Grande Valley. There's a major Army Corps of Engineers dam at Abiquiu that serves as a flood control reservoir, but it also stores San Juan Chama water for the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Authority. There's the Nichols and McClure reservoirs that serve as a drinking water supply for the city of Santa Fe. North of that on the Santa Cruz River, there's the Santa Cruz Reservoir. That is water that's made available for irrigation through exchange with the San Juan Chama system. From a water manager's perspective, the existence of dams is often what allows us to keep a river system wet longer. This year, a lot of large segments of the Rio Grande dried. We think that it would have dried much earlier had there not been some of those reservoirs to have released that water slowly over time, as opposed to just have it all go by in a springtime pulse. The surface and groundwater are interconnected throughout the Espanola Basin. There's very few instances where the groundwater is isolated from the surface water system. The groundwater resources are definitely recharged by the surface water, and also over time release groundwater and storage back into the surface water system. We're subject to a Rio Grande Compact with the states of Colorado and Texas. Colorado is obligated to deliver a certain amount of water to New Mexico at the state line. And based on the flows of the Rio Grande at Ottawa gauge, which basically collects the flows of the main stem of the Rio Grande and the Chama, New Mexico is required to deliver a certain amount of water to Texas at Elephant Butte Reservoir.
New Mexico state laws and their underlying regulations provide a legal framework for administering and managing the use of water.
The law really provides a structure to manage this water resource. There's sufficient amount of controversy and conflict about water management with a pretty comprehensive system of law. Can you imagine what that would be if there were no comprehensive system of law? If you have no rules for the game, there would be absolute chaos.
Well, the statutes in New Mexico, the Water Code, requires that water rights be determined by the court. We have a surface water code that started in 1907 and a groundwater code that started in 1931. It requires the state engineer to declare the basin, which means it has reasonable, ascertainable boundaries. Once he declares the basin, then the state engineer has the jurisdiction over the groundwater. And then when you do a stream adjudication, any hydrologically connected water then is part of the stream system. The people of the state of New Mexico own that, and so the stream adjudication then really relates to the right to use the water. Prior appropriation doctrine was the law in New Mexico before New Mexico was New Mexico. This goes back in history into the Spanish laws that applied during that particular time. The prior appropriation doctrine says first in time, first in right. But all you had to do to establish a water right was to divert a stream system and apply it to beneficial use. There are not too many records about how that occurred. 1907 Water Code changed that a little bit and said that they had, before they could divert the water and apply it to beneficial use, they had to get a permit from the state engineer's office. Then would give the permittee the right to develop that and apply it to beneficial use. And there is an unusual phrase, wet water rights, and that occurred because a permitted right was considered as establishing the water right. The permit did not establish the water right. It just established the right of the permittee to develop that and divert. You could get a permit for, say, 100 acre feet, but after the permittee applied it to beneficial use, it might turn out that the only beneficial use that they could apply it to only took 50 acre feet, and therefore the actual water right would be 50 acre feet rather than the permitted right of 100 acre feet. There's no specific definition of beneficial use in the code. If you can divert water to irrigate farms, that's a beneficial use. The city can ask for water rights to apply to the needs of a city or a municipality. So it's not really a specifically defined thing, but it's a practical thing about what is beneficial use and what isn't. Basically, it says that you can't waste it. The public owns the water. But it is a valuable resource, so it's the right to use the water that becomes the legal interest that someone that has a water right has.
Water infrastructure provides the means to use water through the application of a variety of engineering technologies that require funding for design, construction, operation, and maintenance.
Water infrastructure is a very broad-based question. It's pipelines, it's conveyance devices, it's underground storage, it's above ground storage. I think about it in terms of assets.
The thing that we most frequently associate with water infrastructure is a water distribution system for a community. It might be the wells that take groundwater, then treat it to whatever extent it's needed, or it might be a diversion on a stream system into a treatment plant that treats that water to a drinking water quality and then distribution into the community. That's what we most often think about in terms of water infrastructure. On the tail end of that, there's the wastewater treatment. It's still a water stream and something that we need to treat as an asset, particularly in a dry environment. Then there's irrigation infrastructure. There's diversion dams off of streams. In northern New Mexico, there's an awful lot of acequias that distribute that water for use by individual farmers. Then there's natural infrastructure, the watersheds that capture and hold water if they're functioning well, providing water for native plants and animals, providing water for recreation, all of those things. The dams and the reservoirs, those things are generally created by some government entity. In the case of Nichols and McClure up in the Santa Fe River, those were created by the utility that served the city of Santa Fe. Once the initial investment has been made, it's really important that the customer base support the continued operation, maintenance, and future replacement of that infrastructure. We can't assume that federal or state funds are going to be available for the long term to maintain these systems. Small rural communities have a number of challenges for providing safe drinking water to their customers. First, there's the challenge of creating a community water system. If there's not a community system in place yet, then individuals rely on individual or shared domestic wells. Oftentimes it becomes a challenge just in terms of dealing with your neighbor on what many people look at as kind of a fundamental God-given right. Everybody should have drinking water. When a large number of people within that community start experiencing water supply or water quality problems, that becomes the impetus for creating a system that can be actually run more as a business.
We've seen waves of interest in infrastructure investment. You see a wave where it spikes and there's a lot of resources being put into to keeping the nation's infrastructure up to speed. And then you see it decline over time and things begin to fall apart, and then there's sort of a public outcry that our roads and our water systems and those things are falling apart. In our private businesses, we have to think about what are our expenditures and our revenues and our overhead costs, and all those communities have those same issues to deal with in setting appropriate rates that reflect the value of water. I think we're seeing a lot of transition towards more regionalization of those mutual domestic water systems in order to minimize cost and maximize the asset. I think about the vision that it took to engage on the San Juan Chamba project in the 1960s when they elected to buy into a long-term future water supply that was way out beyond what anybody thought that they needed at the time. That was visionary. But the thing that the San Juan Chamba project has done is provided more certainty in water supply for all of the contractors that were a part of that project. One of the things we would recommend that everybody have is not just one source of water supply, that if that supply is challenged, then you have really significant problems in your region.
The city of Santa Fe has 4 sources of water supply: 2 groundwater well fields and 2 surface water supply sources. With that, we can mix and match sources to sort of roll with whatever punches come our way, drought, infrastructure issues, curtailments on the Rio Grande, what have you. The city had access to San Juan Chama water, which is a federal project that brings water out of the San Juan Mountains in Colorado down to various contractors in the state, but we didn't have direct access to that water. And it's a lot of water, 5,230 acre feet per year. The city endeavored to look at ways that we could directly access that San Juan water that's in the Rio Grande. Beginning in 2000, we developed several feasibility analyses. What should the project look like? Where should it be located? How would we divert and treat the water? And it evolved through the entire decade and became online in May of 2011. So it was a long process, but it's a sustainable supply. The San Juan project has never failed to meet its firm yield commitments to the contractors. And it's a surface supply, so it supplements the groundwater well so that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket, and it's more of a conjunctive use based on sustainability. There are 3 funding partners in this project: the City of Santa Fe County, and Las Campanas. We didn't use any federal money at all. We were lucky enough through several years of going to the state legislature to receive about $25 million in grant money and $17 million in low-interest loans. The final capital cost in this project was $221 million, which is a very large number for any public infrastructure project, especially in a community this small. It wasn't easy. It took time, and it was not politically expedient for a lot of people to talk about raising rates or floating bonds. But raising the money locally was the only option, and it was a lot of money. But we were able to do it, and we finished on time and on budget with this project.
So if you start at the river where our diversion is located, the water is being pumped to Booster Station 1A, where we have the first part of solids removal installed. We have a sediment removal facility at Booster Station 1A that removes solids that are greater than 0.6 micron. When you go at the river and you see the muddy water coming through the river, it's sand, it's dirt, and that is basically what we are removing. Those solids are diverted back to the river.
From there, we go up to Booster Station 2A. 2A is important because it is the point of departure, if you will, between the facilities that are shared by all 3 partners, the city, the county, and Las Campanas, from the river up to 2A. At 2A, Las Campanas has their own separate facility, their own set of pumps, and they can take some amount of water from that booster station directly over to their facilities and put it to use there. So that's where Las Campanas becomes its own facility, if you will.
In this facility, we have 3 250 horsepower pumps. When we're pumping water to our lakes on the golf course, 2 of these pumps are always running simultaneously. The 3rd pump is in standby. The club's use of this raw water is for basically agricultural purposes, irrigation purposes,
The total amount of raw water provided from the Rio Grande today is approximately 88% of the total needs of the golf course. The remainder is the effluent that's been developed at Las Campanas by the Las Campanas Water and Sewer Co-op. The club has its own power system here and provides the power and the pumps to boost the water from here, approximately 500 feet in elevation change and 7 miles duration up to the lakes on the golf course. The water that we pump from the station is under a contract with the County of Santa Fe, which allows the club to divert approximately 600 acre-feet per year to support the water needs of the golf course.
So that's where Las Campanas becomes its own facility, if you will, and the city and the county's water stays in that 30-inch ductile iron pipe the rest of the way up the hill to this plant.
The water that comes from Booster Station 2A enters 2 pre-sedimentation basins, each of 2.5 million gallon in size. The retention time is roughly 4 hours, and the majority of somewhat larger particles are settled out in that process. We literally drive into the pre-sedimentation bases with a little backhoe and bring it out with a loader. Most contaminants really like to attach themselves to solid material. So just by removing the solids out of your water, you're removing 99.5% of all contaminants, because it is their nature, their affinity is to adhere to solid materials. The finer material that is considered to be a colloidal material, it stays a long time in suspension, will get removed in the next treatment process with the aid of ferric chloride. Since we are a surface water treatment plant, we are highly dependent on the water quality of the raw water in the river. Should that river be of poor quality, we decide not to divert water. Extensive studies and analyses of existing data have been performed. We have not found high levels of contaminants in the Rio Grande under standard flow conditions. Our treatment train is basically a reflection of 2 water treatment processes. There is the traditional or conventional water treatment process, which mostly involves the sedimentation, flocculation, sedimentation of your water. And in addition to that process, we also apply the advanced treatment processes, which includes membrane filtration, the ozone application, granulated activated carbon treatment. Then we also have, of course, the chlorination in the finished water tank. We have a variety of monitoring stations. Some of them are online, which means we have meters installed within a certain process, and it collects samples on an ongoing, continuous basis and analyzes them. The thought was to build this plant very robust, very redundant, and to anticipate what may be coming towards us as further development upriver from us may take place.
It's designed to do all things for all people. So it can and most of the time should run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's also designed to be shut down very rapidly or turned back on very rapidly. And we knew that we needed to be able to have that capacity because the water quality in the Rio Grande is so highly variable. We have to react and be on our toes and be very nimble with regard to keeping an eye on water quality in the river and still meeting demands up here in the city. Storage is king. When the raw water quality in the river is poor and we don't want to divert or we can't divert, we've got 8 million gallons stored on site, so we can still treat that water and meet the demands out in the system. Electricity is about 25% of the overall operating costs of this plant. That's with us managing the way we use electricity. We stay off-peak most of the time, which is a very favorable electric rate compared to on-peak. But even so, electricity is a huge cost for this project, so anything we could do to sort of dampen that was something the board wanted us to look at. So solar became a very viable option. It's a big part of our overall power supply for this project.
Another projected example of a regional system in the ESPANOLA Basin is the Amat water rights settlement. It contemplates creating a regional water system that would take water from the Rio Grande, treat it, and deliver it up into the Pojoaque, Nambe, and Tesuque valleys to distribute that water to existing residents and potential future growth out there.
I think the most important thing about the AMIT is that it really does just put it on a human level and say everybody needs the water. The goal was to determine who owned the water in the Pewaukee Valley Basin, and Pueblo Tsuki, Pueblo Pewaukee, Pueblo San Alfonso, and Pueblo Nambe were the 4 pueblos involved, with all the non-Indians living in the area. Just to put it in perspective, you have those 4 pueblos combined are maybe about 2,500 people, and the non-Indians in the area, you probably have about 4,000 or 5,000. It's important to keep up with the growth of population in the area. I think that's one of the big challenges, is that the growth of individual households and economic development is something to be considered when you start talking about infrastructure and the future of water delivery systems. Planning it out right and focusing on trying to get the best system possible, I think we can address all the needs and the issues that people do have. The city of Santa Fe County, have already been through this process with the Buckman diversion. And so we're looking at that, and we're looking what works.
The idea there is to decrease the reliance on individual domestic wells such that over time the available tributary supply in those small stream systems is available for other uses like irrigation, and everybody else still has an option for a safe drinking water supply.
Water management activities include the use of reclaimed wastewater, water conservation practices, adaptation to climate change, ecosystem protection, and watershed management.
We often talk about wastewater, and that might give people the impression that the water itself is something that can be wasted and not be reused again. I like to think about it as the water is helping us get rid of a waste stream, but it's imperative that we reclaim the water and actually put it to other uses. Every bit of water on Earth has been reused time and time and time again. We have to treat wastewater and the reclaimed water as a resource.
We're sitting right near the outfall from the City of Santa Fe wastewater treatment plant. And from this point, we discharge millions of gallons of water every day into the Santa Fe River. It helps keep a pretty healthy river alive. The water supply in Santa Fe is limited, has always been limited. The community uses this for parks, for our municipal recreation complex that includes 2 golf courses. That is all made possible from what's essentially reclaimed wastewater. It's a very high quality product that the city produces.
We're going through a plan right now to decide how to use our treated effluent. It's a large amount of water. It's over 5,000 acre-feet a year. And some of that could very easily come to this plant either directly and be put to direct reuse, or we could put it back in the river and redivert a like amount and bring it back up from the river and treat it here. It's something that we're looking closely at, and I think it might be a very good solution to future water supplies for this community. The city of Santa Fe and Santa Fe County are both very, very good at conserving water. Our gallons per capita per day use is well below, way below the national average. First of all, it's your cheapest and easiest source of water. And in an era when every new source is more expensive than the last source, conservation looks pretty good.
Drinking water rate structures vary from community to community. The city of Santa Fe have rates that increase with increasing use. Those rates are designed to encourage conservation. I'm aware of small mutual domestic associations that simply have a flat rate, regardless of how much anybody uses. Those rates generally don't include any for water itself. Given the uncertainty of other funding streams, I think it's prudent for any community to try and set up a rate structure that will allow them to take care of their own destiny.
We live here in the desert Southwest. Water is a very scarce and important resource. We think it's a responsible thing to do to manage our water, all of our water. In 2010, when the members took over responsibility for running the club, we initiated a program that included removing over 1.5 million square feet of irrigated golf course turf. We're in the process of returning that area to native vegetation, and we have ceased irrigating that portion of the golf course. That by itself has resulted in a reduction in the amount of irrigation water we use by about 20%. We did a major upgrade and modernization of our sprinklers and tied all of our weather data, including rain data, into our irrigation computer so that we could sense if we had significant amounts of rain. We're able to turn the irrigation system off and not water on top of a golf course that's just been rained on. All 7 of the lakes have a playability function on the golf course. 5 of the lakes are specifically plumbed into our irrigation system and provide storage of water. We pull water out of the lakes to irrigate the golf courses with.
We have like 7 ponds out here. They primarily stay unfrozen the whole winter, which enables many migrating waterfowl to overwinter here. We've documented at least 185 different species of birds in the last 3 years that use Los Campanas as a habitat. We have guided bird walks with the Audubon chapter, and then we also do other bird walks throughout the year that are open to the general public. We've built a relationship with Santa Fe Raptor Center and also the Wildlife Center in Espanola. They utilize the golf course as a release point for many songbirds and raptors that they've rehabilitated.
Weather and climate are certainly variable, and in some regards a pretty dramatic impact on the availability of water. Dry weather yields less water, and whatever little bit of water there might be in the system is used up by plants and just through evaporation. And I think climate change is happening. Most climatologists seem to think that we're in a part of the world that's generally going to be hotter and drier. Another related issue is we've had some huge fires throughout the state. That's having some dramatic impacts on watersheds and their ability to either hold or collect water. And so that, if anything, is likely to make water supply availability even more variable than it has been historically. There's a need for a lot more investment in watershed management and maintenance. Things like thinning, perhaps controlled burns, things of that nature, things that will ultimately prevent catastrophic wildfires and make the watersheds physically able to capture and store larger amounts of the water when we do get it in precipitation events. The one thing we really want to try and avoid is when you get a catastrophic fire that completely denudes all the vegetation, and then you have basically nothing to catch the water. And when you have a rain event following that, you have major flooding events with all sorts of damage downstream, ash and mud flows and things of that nature.
I think 30 years ago, we thought, oh, it's reclaimed, do what you want with it. But wet water is so vitally important to the whole community. We're to the point now where water is water. There's not that much difference between treated water and fresh water. I think the biggest challenges are going to be to continue to look at water use and, what is the rights of an ecosystem to water? What are the rights of farmers? What are the rights of recreation when we're using water?
Providing sustainable water supplies depends on the collaborative interaction of federal, state, county, city, and tribal governments, private entities, organizations, and individual citizens. Sustainable water supply also depends on nature. Your interest and efforts will help to ensure water sustainability for the Espanola Basin.